Hi everyone, it's Kristie here from KP Creatives with another video for Two Scrapbook Friends. I cannot believe we are already in November, but here we are, and I'm going to show you one of the first holiday cards I am making this year. So we do have quite a number of inks going on in our collection today. I'm going to show you the final panel of the card we're making so it'll start to make sense and bring everything together. I'm going to be using a layering stencil from Pink Fresh Studio called the Sunburst stencil. And I'm going to be layering a bunch of Distress Oxides onto some Bristol Smooth paper to get this sort of a Christmas half rainbow. If you've had a chance to check out Laura Fedora's videos, she's a big fan of doing a Christmas rainbow, kind of going from red to orangey yellow and into the greens. And I think this is really cool for a fairly clean and simple holiday card. And I know it looks a little bit intense just on this panel, but it really does come together quite nicely. So this is the eventual look we're going for on our card panel today. So you will need a set of inks. I've got the Distress Oxides that we're using listed here. If you don't have Distress Oxides, you could try Distress Inks. You could use Pink Fresh Studio, their dye inks, because they come, the little ink pads come in the 4 packs, really easy to do some layering with those. So that could be an option for you too. And you could use all kinds of different colors. Since I had this stencil, I've really been wanting to try a type of rainbow. So I'm excited to work with you on that today. So you'll need the set of inks that you're going to use. You'll need the stencil. We're going to use some gold paper from Lawn Fawn to jazz up our sentiment. And I've got the standard Nina Solar White Classic Crest in the 110 pound for our card base, which will be a standard A2 card. And we've got some 80-pound Nina to do some layering of die cuts for our sentiment. The paper that I'm going to be blending on is Bristol Smooth paper. And then for our sentiment, we're going to use this great new Happy Holidays die cut from Photoplay. So we'll die cut that a couple of times out of white paper and then pop it up with the gold. So that will be for our sentiment. We talked about the stencil. We've got our card base here, so we'll get that out of the way. And then we're going to add in some of these gems from the Fire Collection gem mix from Picket Fence Studio, just to add a little bit of holiday bling to our card project. So let's get moving with the ink blending. I'm going to start when you're using a stencil like this. I have found it's really best to start with the lightest color of ink that you're going to be using. So we are going to start with Tattered Rose, Scattered Straw, and Shabby Shutters. And then we'll get into the others as we move along. Now, this stencil has 3 stencils in the layering set. I know it will be difficult to see off camera, but they all are numbered up at the top. So when you're working with these in real life, you can very easily see which stencil is number 1, 2, and 3. So number 1 has the most space. So I've got my piece of Bristol Smooth paper cut down, and I'm just going to I'm just going to get some of these inks a little bit more out of the way so that I'm not fighting against space here. So just give me a second. We're going to start with the lightest colors, as I said. It really does help. And then I'll use my blending brushes from Tailored Expressions. I'm going to get out some purple tape just to make a bit of a hinge here for the stencils so things aren't moving all around on my media mat. Get a little bit of purple tape just on the back of the piece of paper so that that's not going to be wiggling. If you wanted to, you could use pixie spray. This stencil's pretty forgiving, so I didn't find pixie spray was necessary. I'm just aligning the stencil up with the bottom edge of my paper. And get the purple tape down, and that's just going to create a little bit of a hinge for us to work with. And I'm going to get a little more purple tape on this edge just so we don't have things flying all around. So I'm going to start with my pink brush with the Tattered Rose. And again, this Bristol paper is absolutely fantastic for ink blending on. It's very, very smooth. And if you haven't tried it, it is really worth getting your hands on some to start ink blending on. It's a really, really fantastic work surface. So I'm not being too fussy here with, you know, the stencil's just wiggling just a little bit at the top. Don't worry about that. As long as you're holding it down in the middle, it will be fine. And I'm just going around about, you know, in between 1/3 and 1/2 of the way around this sunburst with the tattered rose. And I am going to go just a little bit into that shape on the left, just because we're going to want a seamless blend with all of our colors as we go around. So I'm going to leave it at that for the tattered rose. I'm going to come in with my yellow brush for the scattered straw. And you can see I'm not tapping my brush off at all. And that Bristol Smooth paper is not giving me any harsh lines whatsoever as we blend away here. So the first stencil, because it has the most space, this one takes the longest. But once you move on to stencil 2 and 3, this really goes quite quickly. So again, I'm just making sure I'm overlapping a little bit with the tattered rose and the scattered straw. And then I'm going to go in and fill this last section with Shabby Shitters. So here we go, just overlapping a little bit of that nice pale yellow, pale green. I really like this idea of a little, like almost mini Christmas rainbow that that Laura Fedora has featured in some of her videos. It's really, really fun. So I think that is good for our first layer. So you can see there, that's the result of layer number 1 with those 3 colors. I'm going to set the stencil off to the side and I will clean that up later. Get these first 3 Distress Oxides out of the way. And we're going to come in with round 2, which is Abandoned Coral, Dried Marigold, and Evergreen Bough. Evergreen Bough is definitely one of my top 5 favorite Distress Oxides. I absolutely love Evergreen Bough. And in fact, my cousin came with me to a Two Scrapbook Friends retreat in Grand Bend one year. Can't wait to get back to those, but she came with me, and she's not a card maker. She was, you know, looking for a bit of a getaway, so we went together, and I was showing her, you know, how to start making some different things, and she was like, "Oh, where should I start?" And I was like, "Oh, you should start with this gorgeous color, Evergreen Bough." I absolutely love it, and it really works well in this little Christmas collection of colors we have going on today. So I'm going in first with Abandoned Coral right over top of all the openings in stencil number 2. So you can see it goes over some of the tattered rose and intensifies that. And then we're going to just bring it down. I'm trying to make the red and the green the most prominent in this little Christmas rainbow. So I'm okay if I go a little bit further in with the red and the greens. And I've got a Post-it note here just so that I don't get my fingers into the Distress Oxides, because they do take longer to dry than standard dye inks. So you want to make sure you're protecting your project and protecting your fingers. So I'm going in with my orange brush now, just switching it up a little bit as we start to work with Dried Marigold. And you can see how quickly this really does come together once you get that first stencil down. So here we go with Evergreen Bough. Actually might switch up my brush here. All right. Oh, what a gorgeous color. Okay. Let's It's going right over top of that shabby shutters in some areas. We're going to give it a nice blend at the top into our reds and just bring it down a little bit further to blend in with the orange and yellows. Okay, so that's it for stencil number 2. Gonna set the stencil off to the side. Eventually, just lift that tape up. And we are all set with stencil number 3. And again, I'm just lining the stencil up right with the bottom edge of my paper. Nothing fancy or tricky. And we'll get it lined up on this side as well. And our last set of 3 colors is Festive Berries, Wild Honey, and Pine Needles. So let's go in with our red brush for the Festive Berries. This is a lovely, juicy holiday red, which we're starting to see everywhere. And that Festive Berries is really going to punch up our red zone here in the rainbow. So we've got that coming almost all the way down on this right-hand side. Then we're going to go in with Wild Honey for our orange. And this is looking really great. Just going to blend it up into the green zone. And we're going to finish off, going back to my green brush here, with Pine Needles. So again, if you just put your pressure with your Post-it note or scrap paper, whatever you've got on hand, just in the middle, and then things are not going to wiggle around too much on you. If you had the Make Art Station, this would be a great project to use with the Make Art Station, and things wouldn't pop around on you. But I do find the purple tape with a stencil like this, it's usually okay. So we're going to close up the Distress Oxides, get those out of the way. Now, as I mentioned, Distress Oxides take a while to dry. So you don't want to start putting this in your paper trimmer right away or anything like that, because I'm not sure if you can see on camera, but the ink is still a little bit wet. So you're going to want to set this aside to dry or hit it with your heat tool. Now, one thing I wanted to note, the sentiment we're going to be using is that Happy Holidays die cut from Photoplay. So I want it to be the center focal point, but the center focal point is white, and that looks it just looked a little strange to me. So what I'm going to do is very lightly come in with my red blending brush, and I'm super lightly just going to go around in a little circle just in the middle. Now you can see it blended out just the little spokes there. It's okay. You're not going to see very much of it. I just didn't want that middle to be stark white. So you can either let your panel dry a little bit more to do that, or you can do it right away. It doesn't really matter. So the panel, again, that I'm going to be using, I'm going to set this one aside to dry. This one I did yesterday, so it's nice and dry, and we're able to work with it right away. I did cut it down so that it will fit on our A2 card. So we have our card base here, which is the Neenah 110 pound Solar White Classic Crest. This is cut at 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches tall. So it's scored in the middle. And then this panel I cut down to 4 inches across and 5 1/4 inches tall. So we will get a nice margin on our card. So I'm going to get my blending tools out of the way because we're finished with those for the moment, and bring in this Happy Holidays die. So this is a very delicate, intricate and dainty die. I did cut it out of the Neenah 80 pound cardstock twice and layered it together. And what I'm going to do now is just layer up the gold die cut on top. You could put the gold die cut right on top of your card. That's totally cool. I just wanted to have a little bit of dimension, so I'm going to bring in my Lawn Fawn liquid glue, And we're going to get this all glued up and ready to do a stack with the gold. Now, I really like the Lawn Fawn liquid glue for this. You could also use Gina K Connect glue. They dry clear and they are super strong adhesives. Now, one thing we will do, because this die is so dainty, is we will dab off any of the excess glue onto a piece of scrap paper before we start to put it together. The other reason liquid glue is really nice to use for something like this is because you want to have some wiggle room. If you didn't have liquid glue, you could use a piece of Stick It or any type of adhesive sheet as you were doing your die cutting. You could put that on the back of your paper, and then it will be sticky paper. Basically, you're making a sticker. I do like to do that for certain things. However, for something like this, it is a little tricky because you want some wiggle room. So I've got my die cut here. I'm going to flip it over, just dab off some of that excess glue onto a piece of paper towel. And then I'm going to get started by putting this together. And this is, this takes a little bit of time, so bear with me here. I'm just going to get it started on the one side, and then we will wiggle our way around to layering up this lovely scripty Happy Holidays. I really love the font that Photoplay used for this die. It is so pretty. So you can see, just wiggle things around. If you want, you can bring in your tweezers. But it does take a little bit of figuring to get this all lined up. Now, you could layer gold on gold if you wanted. That is okay too. That gold paper is so pretty, I wanted to save it for so many things. So I layered up onto the white paper to save my gold paper for all the shiny things that I want to get together for the holiday projects that I am making. All right, we're nearly done here. This is looking really great. Just gonna wiggle that the D there, the swoop on the D, and that looks excellent. So I'm going to take a block, an old stamping block, and just set it on top of there to let that set up for a moment while we can build the dimension on our card panel. So I'm going to get some of my foam tape, cut a few strips here to add some dimension onto the back of our card panel. And this card doesn't have a lot of weight to it or that we're putting on top. So I'm just going to use 3 strips of the foam tape here. And get that out of the way. Take our release paper off. And then we're going to put a little bit of liquid glue on the back of the foam tape. And that is going to give us a nice little hydroplane so that we can wiggle things around if we need to as we're getting it set up on our final card. So I'm going to bring in my ruler here from my sewing stash, which is going to get us a really great even margin. I'm just coming in 1/8 of an inch from the left-hand side, and I can see on this ruler how to get exactly 1/8 of an inch from the top and the bottom. Just do a quick final check, and I can press down with confidence. Love using that ruler to be able to make sure I'm getting a nice, even, straight margin around my card. All right, so our sentiment has set up for a moment. It's looking great. Just gonna get some glue on the back of it here. And again, we will dab off a lot of that excess well, not a lot, but just a little bit of the excess glue onto a piece of paper towel, scrap paper, whatever you've got handy, just so that we don't get any globbiness on our final project. Making sure we got the glue on those nice swoops of this lovely font so that those parts of the die cut will stay down and secure. And you could also use spray adhesive if you wanted on a die like this. Again, it really depends on how you work with your products, because I kind of like to have the wiggle room. So spray adhesive or the adhesive sheets, I like to use them for bulkier dies. But for dies like this, I don't mind using the liquid glue, just taking a second to dab that off. Then I've got my wiggle room, and I'm not, you know, I'm able to move things around as I need to. So that looks great. And so you can see, just by adding that little tiny bit of red into that center circle, it really does make a difference versus having the gold die cut right on top of stark white. So I really like just that little change. Now, if you didn't like the white in the other areas, you could very, very lightly ink blend with the color in that zone of the rainbow as well. So now I'm going to bring in the Fire Gems from Picket Fence Studio, and they have a great selection in this set of orangey, yellow, and red gems, and I just love them. So we're going to use a few of them on our project today. I think we'll go with the orangey red ones, and in this this set that the section of the little jewel tin that I popped out didn't have too many of those in it, so it's just going to take me a couple seconds to find the colors that I'm looking for. Sorry about that. And I think we will go with 5 of these little sequins gems. These gem packs from Picket Fence are great because they come in a really nice little container that you would have seen at the beginning. I'll just bring it back out here so you can see it. And it just opens, and then there you go. You've got your gems all available and kept in this really lovely container. And they do the same thing with their sequins. So it really is a great option. I honestly can't see another one of that orangey color, so I'm going to go into the pack here and grab one. And while I have that open, pop these unused ones back, and all set for next time. Okay, sorry about that. So we're going to get these placed around our sentiment here. And I just want to have a few jewels here to bling up the project a little bit. I think we might do almost a little cascade here, from like a diagonal cascade. That looks great. So we've got the orangey colors here, the more yellow goldy colors up top, and that looks good. So we'll get these adhered down. I'm just going to use a little dabs of the Lawn Fawn liquid glue. If you're new to this glue and you're using it for gem or sequin placement, give it a second to set up on your project. Sometimes if you go right in and move your gems or jewels right on top of the glue right away, it will wiggle around and you won't feel like you're getting good placement or that it's secure. But if you just leave it a couple seconds, it will set up really nicely and you won't get your jewels wiggling all around. So there we go. This is my first holiday card finished for 2021, even though, as I said earlier, I just can't believe we are already at this time of year. It also feels nice to be making holiday cards. It's a lot of fun to be able to make holiday greetings for the people in your life, or to donate to different charities or anything like that. Every year I do cards to the troops. And send cards to members of the Canadian Armed Forces overseas. And it's really fun to be able to make things and send those greetings out. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Here's the supplies again that we used. If you have a moment, please take a second to subscribe to the channel and give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Thanks so much for joining us, and we will see you next time.